Ah, here. Okay. Well, we're going to get started. It's good to see everybody here tonight. That was a combination of everybody and everyone. So everyone-y, I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, so welcome. I'm Wendy Worden. I'm with the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. I'm the Programs and Services Coordinator, so I'm responsible for programming in the St. Paul Public Library, as well as libraries around the state, as we are the Minnesota Center for the Book, in addition to the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. So we run the Minnesota Book Awards program and many programs with local authors. And Fireside is in its 31st season, and it's our longest running program. It's pretty impressive. I love this series. It is made possible in part through an appropriation from the Minnesota State Legislature to the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. We got lucky enough to be in the base budget. Let's keep that going. Talk to your folks. We're so grateful for your support here this evening, and as we go forward, I think this is going to be a fantastic evening with Pallavi. This book is fun. If you have not read it, please do so. I really enjoyed it. So Pallavi was born in India and raised in New Jersey. She was the winner of the Asian American Writers Workshop's Pages in Progress Prize for Edison, which is the debut novel. And her work has been supported by the First Pages Prize, the Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship Program, Intermedia Arts, the Minnesota State Arts Board, and the Loft Literary Center, the Jerome Foundation Travel and Study Program. She holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and she lives in Minneapolis with her husband and her kiddos, who are here. Hi, family. And I'm really, really happy to be here with you.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you, Wendy, for inviting me, and thank you to the St. Paul or Friends of the St. Paul Public Library and this Fireside Reading Series, which is just such a wonderful treasure that we have here. And I just love that there's an actual fire.
Yeah, the first time. I was like, yeah, we need that. Yeah, we'll toast ourselves.
So great. I love it. And I'm really excited to say one of the fellowships that you just listed, the Intermedia Arts one, I see an old fellow here from that who I haven't seen in 10 years. So this is such a great space to like bring writers together and celebrate the literary community here.
Yes. Do you want to begin with a reading, or should we begin with a little bit of sort of background on maybe where the book started for you?
Sure. Yeah. How is that? How
I'm going to throw that one out there. Maybe we'll start there. So what was sort of the spark of the book, the jumping off point? Was it a character or a particular scene?
Gosh, and well, first of all, it was a very long time ago. So I need to think back. But so I'm not sure if people here have read the book or not, but it takes place in the town of Edison, New Jersey, and that's where I grew up. And so when I kind of at the end of college or beginning of graduate school for creative writing, I knew I didn't know how to write, but I knew that when I figured it out, it would have to be about the town I grew up in, Edison, which is sort of known in America amongst the Indian community, and even in India, it's known that this is sort of the hub for all things Indian in America. And it's just a very weird kind of thing to grow up around that, because I remember when there was just one Indian grocery store there, and my mom referred to it as the Indian store. And it would have groceries and movies, and it was just this, fun place. But then as I grew up in Edison, I watched it turn into just, dozens and dozens of grocery stores, and then video stores, which used to be a thing, and restaurants. And just now it's like a 2-mile stretch of just Indian things. And it's kind of just a really interesting part of America. And so I knew that like the book was going to be about Edison, and that's kind of the spark of the whole thing. But then specifically the story, I think well, there were many iterations. When I was in grad school, I tried to write about it, and it was just awful. And, but you kind of take bits and pieces from different drafts. And one of those drafts I had brought to the Loft Literary Center, where I was in the mentor series there, in which they pair up aspiring writers with more experienced, accomplished writers. And I was lucky enough to be paired there with Sandy Benitez, and she was just wonderful. And she pointed out that in one of my early drafts, that was actually, I think it was part of my thesis from grad school. She pointed out that the kind of most alive character was Hemant Engineer, who is an owner of a grocery store. And that just, that was another little spark that came along. And I thought, I kind of see him really clearly too. And she was right. And I kind of put aside everything else I had, but I like dove into that character. And so then the first scene I wrote actually was when Prem is going into, that's the main character, the the sort of hero of this Bollywood movie. He goes into the store and he's looking for Gold Spot, which is this Indian soda that, it doesn't even exist anymore, but they used to sell it in Edison. And so that's where he kind of encounters Hemant Engineer, and he collides, and it's a mess. But that was the first scene I wrote because it was, I could just see it so clearly. So
It's so good. I'm sorry. The book is very fresh in my mind right now. And I love that scene. So
I love
good
that
job.
you're laughing. That's great.
No, really.
In a good way,
No,
right? Yeah.
absolutely. No, the book is funny.
That's a high compliment.
So if you would share a little bit,
Sure, yeah.
that would be great.
I would love to. I am going to just read from the prologue, so right from the beginning, which I wrote it after I had written other parts of the book already, as I was kind of searching for the story and how to get into this world of Edison. I sat down and was like, I think I need a prologue. And this actually happened in the intermedia arts program that we were in together. That's where that spark of an idea happened there. I can talk about that more later. So this is just right from the very beginning, prologue. Indians add one to things. When, for instance, Hemant Engineer attended the graduation party of his dear friend Sanjay Sapra's daughter at Mughal Fine Indian Cuisine, the most celebrated and formal restaurant in our town, he wrote a check for $101, as opposed to simply 100, and tucked it into a mortar-boarded card. When Leena Engineer, daughter of Hemant, attended wedding after wedding of friends much younger than she was, while being increasingly referred to as still unmarried, and that poor girl, she always brought with her a check for $51. Neither Hemant nor Leena, nor the recipients of these checks, nor the thousands of Indians in Edison, New Jersey, the Hindu ones specifically, who give and receive such checks every week, question the necessity of the extra dollar. If pressed, a resident of Edison, this town brimming with Indians, where some joke there are more Indians than in India herself, might venture the opinion that perhaps it's a superstition, something you do just in case. Such people who add $1 out of fear of repercussions tend to add one to non-monetary amounts as well. Several buildings over from the engineers in King's Court Apartments, Veena Joshi adds one to the end of microwave oven cooking times. 131 for leftover chana, 301 for popcorn. Her Seiko wristwatch is set 1 minute fast, and when she rewarded herself with diamond earrings after years of laboring as a cashier at drug fair and operating a catering business from her apartment on weekends, she insisted they each have precisely 1.1 carats, just in case. Once on a windless midsummer afternoon in 1988, a lively assortment of attendants at the Exxon gas station on Oak Tree Road attempted to answer their fellow attendant Abdul Rashid's question, why the one? Attendant number one, known for his quickness to point out the stupidity of those around him, said, Why are Americans listening to a groundhog for a weather report? His point, which he didn't state outright, but which everyone understood, was that his parents in India added one, and their parents before them, and it was just another of the many inexplicable yet incontrovertible traditions lugged over to America, like cracking a coconut on momentous occasions. It is because zero has no meaning, attendant number 2 said, with a confidence not regularly associated with him. It is nothing, not a good number. Attendant number 3, who was not scheduled to work that day but came to the gas station anyway for time pass for shooting the shit, added that no one affixed one to non-zero ending numbers like 25 or 55. A battered and apologetic looking Buick pulled up and a man started to emerge from it, but the attendants kicked up a mild uproar, sending the man back into his car. "This is New Jersey, sir," attendant number 4 said at the rolled down window. And after the requisite cash or charge exchange, amidst the heady bouquet of regular unleaded, he asked the customer to weigh in on the $1 discussion because, naturally, the man was Indian. What else would he be in this corner of our town? "It is recommended in Hindu culture to stick to odd numbers," the customer said. "In our temples, there's always an odd number of priests. And for the head shaving ceremony of young boys, the child must be an odd number of years old. In weddings, how many sacred steps do the bride and groom take? 7. Before driving off, the customer, who was the chairman of public relations for the Sri Venkateshwar Temple in Pittsburgh, handed attendant number 4 some flyers for the upcoming Janmashtami celebrations, stressing the importance of observing the birth of Krishna, who was, incidentally, 7 years old when he lifted Govardhan Mountain with one hand to shelter villagers from 7 days and 7 nights of cataclysmic rain. Attendant number 4 returned to his friends on the concrete stoops before the pumps. "Really, it is one thing to add a 1 rupee coin, but one whole dollar?" said attendant number 3, the only attendant without the ashy blue uniform. "For birthdays, on anniversaries, and I have 4 sisters I am having to give money to on Rakhi. It adds up, man. The exchange rate is not favorable for carrying over such a tradition." They contemplated a silky black Mercedes as it glided into the station and up to a pump. Attendant number 1 pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his forehead. Attendant number 2 folded a temple flyer into a fan and waved it at his face. Then, in a move that attendants numbers 1 through 3 and Abdul Rashid would regret for years, they coaxed the ever coaxable attendant number 4 into attending to the waiting Mercedes. Attendant number 4 still had the question of $1 in his head when he walked over to the tinted windowed car stopped at the farthest pump from where he'd been sitting. The driver, a jovial Indian who had dyed his hair to what some might argue was too jet a shade of black, made an enthusiastic attempt to explain the meaning of the extra dollar, but found himself stumbling on his answer. "Why don't we ask my good friend Bachchan here?" For decades to come, attendant number 4, Prem Kumar, the hero of our story, would replay this scene again and again in his mind until the image became scratchy over time, just like the videotapes of his favorite movies, Sholay, Dawn, and Amar Akbar Anthony, all of which starred the Big B, Hindi cinema's first action hero, its angry young man, the brooding actor who performed his own stunts and sometimes even sang his own songs, the one-man industry, the lanky king of what the world would one day refer to as Bollywood, whose bouncy, graceful dance moves and romantic big screen interludes with all the leading ladies caused millions to swoon, the erstwhile member of parliament who had by then achieved demigod status, not just amongst Indians, but also Kenyans, Fijians, the Thai, citizens of the Soviet Union, and residents of any nation that imported Hindi films, presumably pirated, which is to say in every corner of the globe. Amitabh Bachchan, the too dark, too gangly, entirely unlikely megastar whose poster had hung in Prem's childhood room, stepped out of the car. "The question you ask," he said in that baritone voice laden with gravitas that Prem knew so well, "is a good one." He folded his arms on the hood of the car. He turned his head and took in the crowd of riveted gas station attendants at a distance. When he returned his gaze to Prem, whose thin, tall frame mirrored his own, the driver had also emerged from the car and was mopping his forehead with his sleeve. Amitabh Bachchan said, I have wondered about this myself. The answer is this. For Prem, it was a moment outside of reality, like a dream sequence from a Hindi movie. He tried, awestruck and trembling, to absorb the words of his idol on the other side of the car. Later, Prem would be grateful that Amitabh Bachchan was not interested that day in engaging in complicated conversation, but instead delivered a sort of monologue, not unlike his powerful monologues in Sharabi, to which Prem was more witness than participant. One extra rupee, one extra dollar, Amitabh Bachchan began. There are many who believe this is given for the purpose of avoiding something bad. They are mistaken. The extra one is for bringing something good. It is for luck. It means, may you add to this money I have given you. Here is 1 rupee for you to begin building on. When we give an extra one on the occasion of a wedding, we are giving the couple a lift toward their journey to prosperity. When we give a young man an extra one on his birthday, we are wishing the same. It means keep going. It is one to grow upon. The gas nozzle clip clicked as if signaling the end of the speech. Amitabh Bachchan removed his arms from the hood of the car and turned and leaned against it, looking out at Oak Tree Road as though there was something there to see. Prem removed the nozzle, replaced the fuel cap, and brought the credit card slip to the driver. And when his work was properly completed, drenched in sweat and the scent of gasoline, he hurried around to Amitabh Bachchan's side of the car and uttered what was in his heart. Sir, thank you, sir. I am hoping you will be winning a Filmfare Award for Shahenshah. The attendants, who had remained silent, as if to keep from breaking a spell, erupted into pandemonium as the Mercedes pulled out of the station. In the din of his friends' cheers and the glare of the day's severe heat, Prem felt as though he were Vijay Verma from Diwar, the role that established Amitabh as the preeminent tragic actor of his day, emerging from the warehouse after single-handedly defeating the bad guys, sunlight reflecting off his badge, a hero in the truest Indian sense. Attendant number 2 and Abdul Rashid were approaching a state of agitation in their desire to learn what Amitabh Bachchan had spoken of. And when Prem related the facts of the encounter, that the most famous actor in the world, the man who would be declared the most popular movie star of the millennium by a 1999 BBC poll, spoke to him about the significance of adding one, the attendants were stupefied. This is what you asked? Not did you almost die during filming of Guli, or who is prettier, Zinat Aman or Parveen Babi? You should have asked, was it difficult to dance on a motorcycle in Muqaddar Ka Sikandar?
That would have been my question.
Attendant number one said, then spat on the ground to remove the bitter taste of missed opportunity from his mouth. Attendant number 3 expressed a far more benign sentiment, saying simply, it was God's intention that I come to the station on my off day so that I might behold Amitabh Bachchan. After the discussions about what was said and how it was said and what Amitabh Bachchan was wearing and how tall he looked were exhausted, attendant number 1 raised the possibility that it wasn't Amitabh Bachchan at all. After all, it was argued, what would he be doing in Edison, New Jersey? For this was before Edison had become what it is amongst us. Before one Indian grocery store became 10, then 20, and eventually all of Oak Tree Road was lined with Indian jewelry stores, grocery stores, video stores, and restaurants, before thousands of Indian people from surrounding areas flocked here to shop and eat on weekends, before Indian American brides from up and down the state and across the country began coming here to shop for their weddings, before a full-fledged India Day parade launched itself down Oak Tree Road every August, to the delight of some and the disgust of others. One day, Indian movie stars would be an unexceptional sight in the USA because they would appear at parades as guests of honor, and they would lip sync and perform elaborately choreographed dances in colossal stage shows that packed Giant Stadium. and they would shoot Kal Ho Na Ho and Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna and many others on location in New York, and Amir Khan would attend the Academy Awards in support of Lagan, and Anil Kapoor would join the cast of 24, and Priyanka Chopra would star in Quantico, and power couple Abhishek Bachchan, the little B as it were, and Aishwarya Rai would be guests on Oprah, and Madhuri Dixit would marry a doctor and move to Denver, and Continental Airlines would unveil a nonstop flight from Indira Gandhi International Airport to Newark Liberty, and the lines would blur between there and here. But these things had not yet come to pass. As the years went on, the attendants would increasingly doubt whether they had really seen Amitabh Bachchan at the Exxon gas station, but Prem always knew it was real. And furthermore, he remembered every word just as Amitabh Bachchan had spoken it. The reason for this was that Prem was a man preoccupied by love. After Amitabh Bachchan talked to him about luck, Prem thought not about the miraculous fact of Amitabh Bachchan talking to him about anything, but rather of his Sapno Ki Rani, his beloved, the queen of his dreams, and the way in which the wise words of the film icon related to her. He thought of all the extra dollars and rupees he'd been given in his 25 years and was struck by the enormity of the good wishes for prosperity that had been conferred upon him. Before leaving, Amitabh Bachchan pulled his wallet from the pocket of his impossibly long white slacks. For you to add upon, he said, and presented Prem with a stiff dollar bill on which he scribbled his signature before handing it over. In that instant, with an Amitabh Bachchan dollar in his hand, Prem was overcome with the suddenly renewed possibility of building himself into someone in this country, a man worthy of Leena Engineer, a man of action, an entrepreneur, a success story, a viable suitor, an extraordinary immigrant in a town of immigrants, a visionary, a husband, a real American hero.
Yay.
Thank you.
And so thank you. That sets up that storytelling style language sets up the tone of the book so well, and the humor in there sets our expectations for sort of where we're going. And we finally get the sense of frame. We're like, who are these attendants? What are they doing? And then here's our protagonist if we've read the flap. And aha. And I love the way this book starts. And so I think you were saying that this wasn't what you started with, but it flows like it was something that was the thing that you wanted to use as the jumping off point. So talk about finding it, please.
Thank you so much for that compliment and for chuckling throughout the
I
reading.
mean,
It was
your humor suits me. We'll talk about it, but it really does.
we get each other.
Yes.
But yeah, so I had started, as I was saying, like in all these different fits and starts, and I knew I wanted to write about Edison. I knew it was going to be a love story just because that's who I am, and that's kind of I just knew it was going to be a love story, but I had no idea. I just couldn't figure out how something was missing. And then when we were in the intermediate arts program together, our mentor there, David Mura, I think he had talked about the the prologue to A Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, which had won the Pulitzer Prize around that time, I think, and how that writer, Diaz, had kind of oriented himself to his story by writing a prologue that talked about like a certain kind of curse that was part of that culture that he was writing about, Dominican American culture, and then how that curse related to his protagonist. And I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I could see how that would orient the whole story, and so I sat down to do that, and I don't think I knew, but as I started, I was like, oh, I should talk about how we add one to things. Like that's just a thing we've always grown up with in Indian American culture, and I was like, oh, that's part of how I'm going to get into this story. And then as I was writing this I was like furiously just trying to like get something out and like make the whole thing, all the research I had done make sense. Um, and so I'm writing about this gas station scene and the plus one, and then Amitabh Bachchan appeared. This like the biggest actor, some would say in the world, because in terms of like the number of people who watch these movies around the world. And I always used to laugh when writers would say things like that, and then this just showed up, and I don't know where it came from. And it's like, well, yeah, it came from your head.
We do get it.
But it really did happen. Like when you're in that flow and in the right mind space, things just do kind of from your subconscious kind of bubble up when they're meant to. But you couldn't like, I couldn't conjure it like while thinking too hard about it. It had to just kind of come from somewhere. And he showed up and I liked it and I went with it. And then when I had the whole thing, like that, the whole prologue, I was like, okay, this is what I needed. This is going to be a book about Bollywood. And it's going to be hopefully a Hindi movie in the form of literary fiction. And it just made sense finally. And I did a lot of research about Hindi movie history and just the conventions. And that was really fun because I'm nerdy and I loved like that academic kind of, I see not going on here. We'll talk about your Bollywood nerdiness.
I'm going to ask you the question that I have on this list.
So yeah, so the prologue really, it just, oh, and well, you were mentioning humor. I didn't like set out to write anything funny. I didn't know I was writing something that was funny, at least in that prologue. And then when we did our intermedia reading, I remember a friend of mine came up to me at the end and was, like, oh, it's really hard to write something that's literary and funny. And I was like, was it funny? And I thought, okay, funny. I'm gonna go with that because I enjoy comedy a lot. And so then that's where that also kind of I leaned into it then. And then yeah, so that everything went much faster after the prologue was written.
That's amazing. Does anybody in the room have a question they'd like to interject? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'll come over here
young
with
lady.
I'll come over with my microphone a little bit here.
Project.
No, it's for the live stream.
Oh.
Otherwise, I'll have to repeat. But anyway, it should catch you.
So the answer might be different hearing your comment around Leena Engineer and that he was real to you the soonest. But I was curious because in the book, there's two characters that I'd call supporting, Leena Engineer being one and wristwatch being the other, where late in the story, you share their backstories. And I'm curious as to, did you know the backstory when you started their role in the story, or did it come to you later?
Oh, yeah, nobody's asked me that. I like that question. Well, the two you said were Hemant and Wristwatch. Okay, so Hemant I knew because he was the actual first character that was really clear to me. So I knew like he was going to be the dad of the heroine, and kind of roughly like what his story was with his wife passing away. And so yeah, I kind of knew some of it. I had to fill in as I needed it. But with Wristwatch, who for those who haven't read the book, he's sort of a hitman who from the Indian mafia that kind of shows up in the story. And I didn't know there was going to be that, like in the beginning, I didn't know the mafia was going to come in, but then that ended up making a lot of sense with the story and also the history of Bollywood movies in Mumbai. And then Wristwatch just kind of emerged, and the reason he's called Wristwatch is it's part of the backstory of how he became a hitman. And I did not, I didn't know I was going to write his whole backstory. There's a chapter in the book that's just his. And when I realized that was what was needed at this point in the story, I was so psyched. I was like, I just really was excited to write that chapter because I think it comes later in the book and I kind of knew what I was doing then and I was enjoying the process and like I knew what the tone of the book was and how I needed to write this. And So I was just excited to like kind of just paint a portrait of who this was. And he turned out to be he starts off as like a scary guy, but then there's comedy, but there's tragedy. And I just really, and then I also had to do a little research on tapestries and the textile industry in Mumbai, which was not anything I knew about. But I really, again, the nerdy part of me really enjoyed that research. So yeah, that all came later, and I was really excited to do that part.
Could you talk just a tiny bit about the mafia and Bollywood connection? Because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
fascinating.
I hope they're not watching.
I know, I know, like, hello. You're no threat.
Um, yeah, well, in the course of my research about the industry, um, I learned that I kind of had heard rumors, I guess, like in the magazines that they were part of like the financing early on in the Hindi film industry. But then when I was reading these academic books, I kind of really understood how crucial they were to getting these early movies made because the government was not funding them at the time, and they really had a lot to do with that world. And so, but because they were funding some of these like producing these movies, they also got to have a little bit of a say in them, which uh, I guess is not that different from what maybe has happened here in the past. So yeah, and the mafia family that I create in this book is fictional. It's fictional. It was created, but maybe a couple of things from were pulled from real life stories, but I won't say what. Because my kids are here. I don't want them to get hurt, but by the mafia. But yeah, so some bits and pieces came from that, and then other stuff I just created.
Yeah. They're also very cinematic in the way of, I mean, all the characters are to a degree, but I find the mafia folks particularly movie-like in their expression.
I should say I'm also huge. My favorite movie is The Godfather. And so I kind of for my own amusement also wanted to put some Godfather stuff in there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Anybody? You got some?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Colleen, and I did the Beyond the Pure Fellowship with Pallavi and a few others. We had two different mentors, David Mira for the first part and then Anya Achtenberg for the second part. And it was really fascinating. But yes, you were always very funny. And your writing was fun and funny, but also poignant and touching. And so I'm so excited too. I mean, congratulations, because I remember when you were talking about this is something you want to do and you've done it. So I think that's just great. And then I want to say that when we were in that cohort with those mentors, we talked a lot about process and we tried some things out. So as I listen to you now, I hear you talk about process. So I'm just wondering, was there anything that you did structurally to enhance the process, or was this kind of, it came to you? I mean, you talked about these characters kind of coming to, can you talk a little bit about process? A little more.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely. I mean, it was a long, long process for me because when I decided to be a writer, I did not know how to write. I just knew I loved literature and I wanted to be part of it. And after college, had gone into publishing. I was in editing at Simon and Schuster, but very, entry level right out of college. And then I worked at a web magazine that it was like an Indian American web magazine through which, actually, this is a side note, but because of that job in New York, I got to meet some of these Bollywood stars and kind of see the behind the scenes of some ridiculous things that did make it into the book. But yeah, so I didn't know how to write fiction when I started. So the process was a long one. The most important part was reading a lot, and then just trying and trying and trying until I kind of had developed a structure. And then, as I said, the prologue really put things into focus. And then from there, I I just did plot outline. Like I read books about story structure. That there's one in particular I liked that was Story Structure Architect, and it just was kind of like, okay, here you have to have this happen at roughly at this time. And if you're writing a very traditional book, there's other ways to do it. But I knew I wanted it to be kind of that traditional, like, or ramping things up and there's a climax and then a, denouement. And so, and it was also going to be I was imagining it as a Hindi movie, so that I could follow that structure too, which is pretty straightforward. So yeah, I had that whole I had handwritten it. I liked, I from that era that still likes to handwrite. And so I had this big document that was like chapter by chapter, here's what has to happen. And so within that though, like I knew, okay, in chapter, 35, I need this thing to happen, but I don't know how it's going to happen. So that's when the fun part it was like the fun part of writing, because I could be like, okay, by the end of this chapter, he has to be over here talking to this person. But how do I get him there? And so then I would just sit down, and that's when people would appear or ideas would come, and then there's research within there, like every time there was the big research of Edison, and then there was the big research of the Hindi film industry, and there was some Thomas Edison research. And anytime I like came across like something else I wanted to throw in and I wanted to make it authentic, I would do more research and then try to figure out, okay, how am I going to integrate this into, and then there was, the kids can tell you, my husband, that for many years there were a whole lot of cork boards just spread out with all these notes and just, directions of how things had to go and what had to go into what. And but slowly, it became like one cork board, and then it was like 2 post-it notes. That was very exciting when it was just 2 post-it notes as opposed to, hundreds.
I find it very admirable when people can be that orderly about their process, because I'm just like,
Well, you're a writer. Is your process different than that?
it is a lot of just, I know I want this thing and I would like this feeling and I
Yeah.
would like to address this particular question. I mean, I mostly, I'm a prose writer. I do write some fiction, but I write a lot of personal essay and
Okay.
memoir and things.
Mhm.
So I do get a lot of like freedom to just sort of freewheel around in my research and
Right.
and luxuriate in that process.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah.
I think it's a mix, right, of the genre, as you
Mhm.
said, and then like the personality. Because I know there are so many fiction writers who do it that way too,
Yeah.
and I really am just in awe of that, where they're like, oh, I just imagined. Like I remember Murakami saying about the Wind Up Bird Chronicles that he imagined this guy making spaghetti, and then this amazing masterpiece came out of that. I'm like, how did that happen?
It's amazing also.
But yeah, that sort of feeling it around and just having a vague notion, like I think that's really admirable. But I'm just in life, like I'm a list person, and that's how I think of things. But I did enjoy within the list and within the structure having a little freedom.
That's the magic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think.
And I know that I watched when you had Mona
Mona Power, yeah.
I really enjoyed like what she was talking about with her process was that it was very spiritual for
Right.
her. And it just like things would
Yeah.
happen, and she kind of, it was a lot of feeling.
The things coming through
Yeah.
the writer. Kalia Yang talks about that sort of
Oh,
process as
okay.
well, where she's just like, I'm here, and then it's there.
Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, I should try that next time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Just find that meditative empty space and
Yeah.
let what comes come. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, but it sounds like your process is almost tactile in some ways, because you're creating a physical board that it's like touching it helps make it real.
I never thought of it that way, but yeah, I like to see my lists. And for years, my husband, who's right here, he's been, so in general, talking about like, why don't you just have the lists like digitally, like they're, even whether it's for writing or for my everyday life, but I like to just write things down and I like to have it all visible at all times. And
You should talk to my partner. It's lists everywhere. Paper, paper. It is now. We're a bunch of regulars and friends here, so.
so, yeah, I liked having just all these cork boards out and even like at one point I had printed out pictures of two Bollywood actors that I kind of imagined to be what my characters looked like, and I know I could have left them on the board on the computer, but I hung them up in above my desk.
The question here is which Bollywood actors did she have hanging on her wall?
Yeah. Well, I had an old one, and I talk about him in the book. It was Shashi Kapoor, who was like a more of a 70s actor. So that's kind of how I imagined Prem to look and how I described him. But for the female lead, I had originally had a picture of Manisha Koirala on my she's from like the 90s from my day. But then like that wasn't working. Like I kept looking at her picture and it just wasn't working. And then one day I realized no, she is Priyanka Chopra. And then I switched pictures and then it just was like, yeah,
Ta-da.
that's clear. Yeah, and that helped me. That switch, that like visual switch, really helped me to write a particular chapter early. Like I had written a lot of the book, but then I went back and wrote an earlier chapter, like when one of the sort of courtship chapters, and it just became so much easier to write because I could picture Priyanka, and I was like, well, yeah, that's what she would do.
That's really fun. I'm gonna throw out. Do you have one from online?
What
Oh.
do you believe is the role of a book's ending, or more specifically, what did you feel the ending of your book was supposed to do?
Ooh.
Wow. That's a hard one. I don't know if I got it right or not, but or maybe there is no right or wrong. Okay, so the role of a book's ending. So I read that Amitabh Bachchan said about Hindi movies, about Bollywood movies, that people, because they're masala films, which is like a masala is like a mixture of spices. So masala films, which describe Bollywood movies, are like, they're a mix of all these genres kind of all in one. So you get everything out of them. So comedy, drama, romance, action, song and dance. And so Amitabh Bachchan said that by the end of the movie, audiences should be leaving the theater with a smile on their lips and a tear drying on their cheeks. And so I kind of had that in mind. So that's because my book, I was thinking of it as a Bollywood movie. I kind of had that in mind of like, okay, let's have, there's the smile, but also like some degree of drama. So I don't know if that really answers the question about book endings, but I kind of was thinking more about the Bollywood movie ending. But I think in general, it's also like I wanted to tie up loose ends. So there's obviously the main story of the romance, but then I also wanted to kind of talk a little bit about where some of the supporting characters ended up, like what happened to Hemant, and where's the wristwatch, or what's happening with all the roommates, are they okay? And so I kind of touch on that, and so yeah, just tying all of that up, and yeah, I think that those are the things I had in mind. Thank you for that question.
Another one over here.
Colleen again. And I just have to say, I had a high school English teacher, my 11th grade teacher, Mr. Olson in the Osceola School District. He's retired now, but he believed that all stories connect. So the question about an ending, is there an ending? But when I hear you talk about this, and I haven't yet read the book, and thinking back to what we talked about earlier before the event started, just thinking, I know I asked you what's next, but when you talk, have you thought about your book being produced as a
Yeah.
movie or a
Oh.
stage play? Have you thought about sequels? If the ending, lays the seeds
Yeah.
for more stories, I don't know. Just
Yeah,
thinking.
no, that's a very writerly question. So no to the sequel, because it just felt, I gave this everything I had. And so I think it's done the way it is. And when I write something else, it'll be separate. But as you said, look, there will be connections because I'm the connection. So there's so much of me in this book. There's going to be so much of me in that book. I don't know how if it'll be obvious connections or more subtle, but but then also with the question about the movies, that's come up a bit, with these readings I've done, and I'm not against it. But, so if you're out there, if the mafia wants to finance this, I'm cool with that. But I think it's a whole other world that I don't know anything about. So
I kept imagining it as a series because you could really spend so much time with some of your side characters that
Oh.
you get kind of attached to throughout the process.
would you
and-
read the screenplay?
Yes. Do you have a favorite among all of these wonderful people that populate this book?
Oh gosh. Well, definitely wristwatch, but we already talked
We did
about.
talk about
him,
wristwatch.
But I really enjoyed like being able to use the Bollywood actors, like the actors that are in the book are actual actors. They're based on the actual actors, and one of which is featured on this young lady's shirt.
Yeah, yes, please.
do. She's
Tell
just awesome.
tell us about
Shah Rukh Khan.
the.
the Reading King, and yeah.
Yeah, we love it. We love to see
he's-
it.
So I got to just create like, or I get to invent things for them to say and get in their heads. And so it was really fun. Like with Amitabh Bachchan, there is a chapter that's just about him. And that was really, I wanted to, I don't know, honor him and to write him in a really regal way, because that's how I think about him. And he is this larger than life, like person, like just to give you a sense of who he is, every Sunday when he's at his house in Mumbai, like if he's in town, every Sunday for the past at least, 20, 30 years, he'll come outside for just a few minutes or an hour, and there's like hundreds of people gather just to see, because he's going to wave. And have you seen them? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've seen videos though on YouTube.
Oh, you have? Yeah. Yeah.
Would it be any louder?
Yeah. Yeah.
What- Posters and
Oh, they hold it. Yeah.
Like-
Is
in his movie Fan, they have like all that.
Yeah, like people show up with all kinds of Amitabh memorabilia, and he'll like sign, like he stays behind the gate of his house, otherwise it would be a mob, and there's tons of security, but it's just like a throng of people. And this is for 30 years, almost, every Sunday that he's in town. And so he's just beyond anything. Another example of this, which I love, is that so he had a cameo in the movie The Great Gatsby, the version with Leonardo DiCaprio. And he, because Baz Luhrmann had been the director of that, and he's a huge Bollywood fan. And, he put song and dance in his movies like Moulin Rouge, and he's inspired by Bollywood. So he was like, let's get Amitabh Bachchan to do a cameo. And he does. And so they're promoting the movie in New York, like I guess it was like the premiere or release or something. And there's this huge crowd of people there. It was like a lot of Indian American people. And they were there for Amitabh Bachchan. And everybody was like, we thought there was going to be this crazy crowd for Leo. But everybody was like, it was just like, that's how big he is. Everyone was like, nobody's here for Leo. These people are all here for
This pleases me.
Poor Leo. So anyway, I was really excited to get to honor him by writing something that I hope is a positive portrayal of him. But then it was also really fun to, it's just kind of, I felt like I was like the puppet master of some of, taking these little Bollywood actors and making them my dolls and making them do like really bizarre things that they wouldn't normally have done. And so that, I really enjoyed that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pop back here.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about setting, because you talked about, sort of the corner store, the grocery store, the gas station. And I recently read James McBride's book, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store,
Oh, yeah.
which is set in kind of the same place. It's like community around this commercial setting. And
Yeah.
is that something, that's something that's sort of happening now, or has that always been the case? Or do you kind of think about that as here's the center of community?
Yeah, I just love that you mentioned that book, Heaven and Earth, the grocery store. 'Cause it was phenomenal. And when I was reading it, I was like, I wish I could do it just like how he's doing it. That came out after this book was already out, or I read it after this book was already out, my book. And so, yeah, he does such a great job of that. And I was trying to do something along those lines. But so Edison is a real place. So I didn't it was really just, I felt like more telling the story of something that was already there. And so when I grew up in Edison, well, this book takes place between 1987 and 2002. And which is, and I lived in Edison from like late 70s till about, I went to college in 1994. Okay, so that's the time period that I saw Edison grow into what it is now. And so I was just trying to get it right. Like I was trying to remember the original grocery store that was there. And then what came next, it was like that pizza place. They added in, a local pizza place owned by an Italian family added in like an Indo-Pak pizza, they called it, Indian Pakistani, which had like extra spices. And we all were like, oh my God, we feel so seen. Spicy pizza. And then an actual Indian restaurant opened right next to it called Ashoka. And then when I couldn't remember the names of different restaurants, I would invent them because I didn't want to misrepresent anything. But when I did know the names, I would put those in and sort of, I wanted to show how hard everybody was working to make it into this place that it is, because the area that used to be there where Oak Tree Road is now, that Little India is, it was like dive bars and like some bad stuff happening there and not like a safe part of town. And now it's this wonderful place where you can take your family and have like great food and shop all day. It's really a wonderful place. So I wanted to make sure I kind of told the story in stages where you could see it becoming what it is and seeing the people who built it up to what it is. Does that answer the question? Kind of.
Something from online, Cameron.
Does Amitabh Bachchan know about the book?
I think he does. If you know him, if anybody knows him, can you please give him a copy? I would love for him. I really would love for him to just because I love him so much and my husband loves him so much, it would be really an amazing thing if he could take a look at it. Yes, young lady, you have a question? How are you gonna get a hold? This is my daughter. Raina. Okay.
That's the way this works. We're just about rounding it out here, and I kind of like I'm like, oh, I had so many other questions, but these have been great questions.
Yeah.
I do want to end it with more silliness, honestly. Where would a complete Indian film newbie start their journey? And maybe you've got ideas,
I
maybe
think,
you have
yeah.
ideas, but.
Shanti,
Oh,
Well,
Shanti, oh,
no shame.
okay,
gosh.
okay. Om Shanti Om
I
for the
love it.
audience in the back.
Okay, okay. Yeah, well, you know, probably more of the more recent ones, like the
Recent or
time
not?
that I've written about in the book, and that I was like, that was the height of my Bollywood watching was the 90s, like the late 90s. No, the 90s. Who did you say?
I said DDO.
Yeah, DDLJ, exactly. So there's a movie called Dil Wale Dulhania Le Jayenge. And so if you want, yeah.
Yes.
So if you wanted to look it up, you could just Google DDLJ and Bollywood, and a million things will come up. And it's from the 90s, and that's the movie that was very astute of you, because that's the one I've been directing people to, because it's kind of it embodies kind of what people might think of when with the almost the stereotype of Bollywood. Like it has that, like, everything in it. It's like a big budget, romance and family drama, and just amazing songs and dance and oh, and the bathrooms are about to close. Um,
Sorry, try to wrap this up before the announcement and it doesn't work.
Yeah, that one, and that movie, it's still playing in a theater in India. Like it came out in like 1995, a resident expert.
Wonderful aficionado in this room.
And there's a lot about that movie in the book too, because in that movie, the father's blessing on the marriage is a really big deal, which is the case in Hindu culture historically. And so I thought a lot about that movie when writing this book, and then I told sort of the history of that book. And so that movie, and that movie is still playing. There's a theater, and there was a New York Times article about this, I think a couple of years ago, about a woman who goes to see that movie every day.
Wow.
She's like comes from a very like poor background, and she works really hard, and her getaway is to go see that every day. And
Huh.
and it's still playing. I forget what theater. It's in Mumbai, but to give you a sense of like the hold that this movie has had. And now I'm really hyping it up too much. It's
And yet it is a cultural artifact to which we should pay some attention. I think that's great.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming and
you.
for listening.
Thank you for another excellent season of Fireside. We do have the book for sale. Thank you to Black Garnet for providing our books for sale, obviously. And my colleague Megan can help you with that. She's back there. And yeah, thank you very much. We'll wish you a good night and get us out of here before the library chases us out.
Thank you.
Yay. Yes, yes. I'm like.